My name is Christopher Eachus. I am a New York State Assemblyman, and I represent District 99, which is a large part of Orange County and some of Rockland County. Today, we just saw a movie about plastics and the proliferation of plastics here in the world. And one of the nice things that we actually got from the movie is that it's not too late. It's not too late to start trying to get rid of the toxic chemicals in plastics. Plastics themselves, we found out, are not necessarily dangerous, but some of the chemicals in them are absolutely toxic for humans. And so we're hoping to have a panel discussion this afternoon and talk with people, answer their questions as best we can with the knowledge that we have about how we can reduce the plastics in our society.
I'm Mike Shade. I'm the Senior Director of Programs and Strategy at Toxic Free Future. And I'm going to talk about simple steps that we all can take to not only reduce our exposure to plastics and plastic chemicals, but what are policy solutions that we can fight for to protect our families and communities to dangerous chemicals like phthalates and bisphenols that are wreaking havoc on our hormones.
My name is Suzanne Barclay, and I'm a volunteer with an organization called Beyond Plastic. And today we're going to talk about the ubiquity of this problem, how it affects people virtually around the world. But we're also going to be talking about some simple steps that people can take to reduce their exposure to plastics.
Hi, my name is Lisa Mendish. I'm a diagnostic medical sonographer working in obstetrics and gynecology for my life's career. I'm also a co-chair of the Citizens Environmental Advisory Committee in the town of Highland Falls. When I found out that plastics were in the placenta and in our fetuses and young children, I decided I had to do something about it. So I'm here today to talk a little bit more about the effects of plastics in that stage of life.
I'd like to introduce our moderators. As a planner, Suzanne has worked in municipal, county, and state government on land use. Suzanne's down here in the end. Environmental and public housing issues. She served as the executive director of Cornell Cooperative Extension of Rockland from 2017 to 2023. Since she has retired, Suzanne has been focusing on plastic pollution by volunteering with Beyond Plastics. She's now learning the fine arts of PowerPoint presentations and lobbying. Suzanne also serves as co-president of the League of Women Voters in Rockland County. Suzanne earned her BA from Washington University and Master's in City Planning from MIT. More recently, she is a PREA graduate of the Trash Academy at New York City Sanitation Foundation. So welcome very much, Susan, and thank you for your assistance.
Thank you very much, Marion. Thank you for having us all here today. Before we begin our panel, and I'll introduce everyone, I'd like to ask the audience just a couple of questions. So first of all, how many of you are totally new to this issue of plastic pollution? Raise your hand. Okay. And how many of you are new to the issue of microplastics and nanoplastics in the human body? Okay. Thank you. So this is a very difficult film. This is the third time I've seen it, and I still find it kind of takes my breath away. The significance of it, the ubiquity of the issue, and my ability to affect it. But today we have three very impressive panelists to talk about this film and the issue, each of whom brings a different but very relevant perspective. So on my right is Assemblyman Christopher Eachus. Hopefully you know him as your Assemblyman for New York State Assembly District 99. And he's been your Assemblyman since 2023. Before that, he was an Orange County legislator. And I believe during that 16-year period, you were also teaching high school AP Physics, Earth Science, Math, and Engineering here in the Hudson Valley. As an assemblyman, he sits on 6 committees, including aging, mental health, higher ed, transportation, Veterans Affairs, and the Puerto Rican Hispanic Task Force. He also serves on the City of Newburgh Salvation Army's Advisory Board and is an active member of the Quassia Creek Watershed Association. So, Assemblyman Eachus, we know the legislature is still in session. This is a very busy time, but thank you for joining us today. At the end of the seating is Lisa Mendish, and Lisa is was a registered diagnostic sonography coordinator for ultrasound services for Valley Hospital Systems for many years. Her focus was maternal, fetal medicine, and gynecology. During her career, she reviewed literally thousands of OBGYN scans. She also managed an organic produce pod from her home for 18 years, meaning that she was the distributor of organic produce for a number of food co-op members. Currently, she's the co-chair of the Town of Highlands Citizens Environmental Advisory Committee, which focuses on clean energy, both to help residents save money, but also to advance the state's energy goals. And then finally, Michael Shade. Michael brings vast experience with some of the chemicals highlighted in this film, such as the phthalates and bisphenol A. As the markets campaign coordinator for the Center for Health, Environment and Justice, he led campaigns to phase out these harmful chemicals in consumer products and packaging. Mike is currently the Senior Director for Programs and Strategy at Toxic Free Future. Toxic Free Future seeks to remove toxic chemicals from our lives through research, advocacy, organizing, and consumer engagement. For 11 years, he managed a national Mind the Store program, which encourages retailers to move away from hazardous chemicals to safer chemical policies. And they are currently conducting a campaign to demand corporate accountability, targeting Home Depot for using toxic plastics in their packaging. So, an impressive panel indeed. So, welcome all. I'd like to begin, first of all, with your reactions to this film. So, it's something that Lisa.
Wow. I realized that Lisa understood everything of that film with her background. Congratulations. That was, although I knew about nanoplastics and microbeads and so on like that, I had never been presented it that way. That was pretty, it was graphic, which was good. You know, it made you open your eyes. I heard wows behind me at times and so on like that. And it's a great film. It's made very well. And for those who really care, it hits them in the heart. You know, it really has an effect, as it did me. And the one nice thing I did say, I said this in a little video outside, is, and this part I love, is that although we're late, it's not too late. Okay? It's not too late. And we now know that there are things that we can do to back off out of this whole toxic environment that we put ourselves in. And I just want to say, especially after watching this film, I want to say to probably just about everybody in here who's younger than I am, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I put you here with that. It certainly was my generation that didn't care, I guess, or didn't look into it. So please accept my apology and let's do something about it. Oh, you have one. Yeah.
Mike, you have such an extensive background in this area. Tell us, though, did anything surprise you from this film?
No. I've been working on the chemicals highlighted in the film for 20 years now, so it didn't quite surprise me. But I will say is that the film gave me a sense of hope. The fact that there are simple steps that we can take to protect our families and communities from dangerous chemicals and plastics. I was really excited to see that when people did make certain lifestyle changes, they saw their levels of phthalates and bisphenols, bisphenol A particularly, plummet. And not only that, but they also saw their reproductive health improve. And we saw in several cases, folks were actually able to have children, likely as a result of the lifestyle changes that they made. So I think that the film gave me a sense of hope that change is possible. It doesn't have to be this way. There are steps that we all can take to safeguard our health, but at the same time, the film, I think, also reminds us that we need systemic solutions, and we currently have legislation here in New York that would regulate plastics and plastic chemicals, and I think the film really reminded me of the importance of trying to get this legislation passed this legislative session here in New York.
And Lisa, given your professional background, what moved you in this film, or what surprised you, if anything?
Well, I think that what surprised me initially was the fact that there is such a big cohort of people that are already fighting to improve the situation. Green chemistry, to me, is the way to go, besides changing the laws. And one thing that I found out after I watched the film, I looked up some of the participants, and Eric has decided to go to law school. So he's changing his career from a pastor to fight plastic production, which is what we really need. The other thing that I was encouraged about is the fact that Shauna Swan and her team are going to be able to go further. This was just a pilot study, and hopefully get some federal or, some grants to get a bigger push to stop this pervasive problem.
Thank you. So let's begin with you, Mike. The film is very focused on toxic chemicals in plastic packaging, but many people don't understand why these very toxic chemicals continue to be used when the health risks and impact have been known for decades. And we hear currently that the chemical industry is pushing legislation to further limit the EPA's ability to regulate chemicals. So, can you please explain the Toxicity Substance Control Act, known as TSCA, and offer some insight?
Yeah, happy to. Whoa, that was loud. Let me keep that a little further away. So the Toxic Substances Control Act, for those of you that may not be familiar, it's the primary law that regulates chemicals like plastic chemicals that we saw here. It was passed in 1976. Sadly, the law is widely seen historically as an utter failure. When the law was enacted, it grandfathered literally tens of thousands of chemicals onto the market, assuming that they were completely safe. Chemicals like those that you saw in the film, phthalates, bisphenols, flame retardants. That legislation was like, hey, we don't need to worry about 80,000 chemicals. We're just going to assume that they're safe. Well, here we are decades later, and now we know that there are thousands of chemicals that are highly hazardous to human health and the environment. The good news is, in 2016, our organization led a national campaign that got Congress to reform the Toxic Substances Control Act. Before TSCA was reformed in 2016, EPA could not even ban asbestos, a substance that kills tens of thousands of chemicals on an annual basis. Before TSCA was reformed, EPA could do nothing to protect American families from dangerous chemicals like phthalates and bisphenols. Legislation was passed. It was signed into law by President Obama in 2016. It gave EPA the authority to finally regulate chemicals like phthalates and bisphenols. And since the legislation was enacted, EPA has begun to enact bans on cancer-causing chemicals like asbestos, trichloroethylene, methylene chloride, chemicals that can cause cancer and other serious health problems. The bad news is, because the law has been effective, the chemical industry is now working to turn back the clock. They have worked with largely Republicans in Congress to introduce legislation in the House. They've also released discussion drafts in the Senate that unfortunately would roll back the protections that we won in 2016. It would make it virtually impossible for EPA to regulate, restrict, or ban chemicals like phthalates, chemicals like bisphenols, substances like asbestos that kill tens of thousands of Americans. So this is a massive threat to our ability to protect
American families, consumers, communities, workers from plastic chemicals. The good news is we are building a coalition of organizations to fight back. We have formed a national alliance, the Alliance for Health and Safe Chemicals, that are working to prevent the chemical industry and members of Congress to weaken this federal chemical safety law. And I encourage all of you after today to go to our website at toxicfreefuture.org, take action, and you can send a message to your members of Congress urging them to not weaken, but to strengthen federal protections on toxic chemicals. We can't allow our nation's primary chemical safety law to be weakened, which will only lead to more exposure to endocrine disrupting chemicals that are harmful to our health. So go to our website, toxicfreefuture.org, take action, and send a message to your members of Congress today.
Thank you, Mike. So Lisa, when you were a sonographer, did medical staff talk about plastic pollution? Did they know about it then? Do you think they know about it now?
Well, no one was talking about it. And when I started looking into this, I went back to some of my colleagues and I asked them about it. And some people who I thought were very progressive said, oh, I don't know anything about this. As I look more and more, I see there's more and more literature coming out. In fact, next month in Philadelphia, there's an ultrasound conference that's well-renowned, and there are some studies being presented about the microplastics in the placenta. So it's the Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine is now talking about it. American Academy of Pediatrics are talking about it. The American Medical Association. So there's a lot of literature coming out, and there's a lot of undeniable conversations that are starting to happen. I'm not sure if everybody wanted to admit it to me, but I know that people have to start addressing it. One thing I did notice while I was scanning thousands and thousands of babies, one of the big things that the doctors try to have us do is always measure the baby. And there's a lot of intrauterine growth restriction and premature delivery. And we see now that this is basically a huge contribution from plastics. So you learned in the film that plastics get in through inhalation, through ingestion, through skin absorption. And when that happens, we thought maybe the natural barriers in the placenta would stop those migrations, but they get very, very small, that they can pass through these very tiny vessels. So we are able to see with some of the newer technology now that microplastics have made their way into amniotic fluid and as well as through the fetus. So the cell disruption is not good. It is, and I know this is more than what you asked, but the hormonal reaction that takes place in the first 10 weeks of pregnancy is so exquisitely timed. The fetus is totally developed by 10 weeks. So within that 10 weeks, there's a sequence of hormonal reactions that must go on at specific times, and a cell can get damaged by a jagged nanoplastic. It can confuse hormone reactions. It can kill cells. And if those things don't happen at the right time, then it could lead to malformations and growth restriction.
Thank you. I just want to do a follow-up question for you, Lisa, and then we'll switch gears a bit. So let's get specific. If you were concerned about your phthalates level or bisphenol A levels, could you have yourself tested? And how easy is it? Does insurance cover it? Where do you go?
Well, doctors don't typically test for microplastics, but there are companies out now, and Shauna Swan has put her patients on them, where Million Marker is the name of a company, and you can get information about it on our table back there. Whereas you get a take-home kit, there's a couple of tests that you do, urine tests, costs about $1,000. It's not reimbursed by insurance companies, but I do know that you can use your health savings account or your flexible spending account to get reductions in your taxes on it. With that, you get the test, and you also get a year's worth of interactive education and an action plan. So it's very specifically designed because every human body is different. And so that seems very supportive to me. There is another company out there called PREA, KeySpan, and that's a blood test, a little fingerprint. You do it at home. It's $125. These scan for like 13 toxins and things that are hormonal triggers for cell death and infertility.
Thank you. So Mike, when I walk into Lowe's or Home Depot, the smell of fertilizers and I don't know what else, pesticides, I find overwhelming. And I often wonder about what it's doing to the employees who have to breathe that 8 hours a day. Tell us about one of your corporate campaigns to get companies to reduce their use of toxic chemicals.
Yeah, so, I think it's probably not a surprise to most of us that EPA is not doing a very good job of protecting families and communities from plastic chemicals in this administration. The good news is that we know that solutions are available. We know that businesses can play an important role in getting toxic chemicals out of consumer products. Back in 2008, I put out a study called Baby's Toxic Bottle, where we researched bisphenol A in baby bottles. And within a year, we convinced companies like Target and Walmart and Toys R Us to get bisphenol A out of baby bottles. About 10 years later, we worked on a campaign to get the Home Depot to phase phthalates out of vinyl flooring. So we've seen time and time again that businesses can often move quicker than the federal government in addressing chemicals and plastics of concern when we equip business leaders with information about problematic issues. In the film, we learned about phthalates. Over 90% of all phthalates are used to soften PVC or vinyl plastic that's commonly found in shower curtains, flooring, carpeting, wall coverings. One of the areas where PVC plastic is also used is in packaging. If you've ever had that blister packaging that's really hard to open, you have to use your scissors to get it open, that's often PVC. If you take a look at a packaging and it has a recycling symbol doesn't mean that it's recyclable. That's a scam. But if you look at the recycling symbol and it has the number 3 or the letters V, that means that it's made out of PVC. PVC is a plastic that's toxic from production to use to disposal. When it's made, it can harm communities and workers. When you use it, you could be exposed to phthalate chemicals. Like I said, 90% of all phthalates are used to soften vinyl. And when you dispose of it, when it's burned in incinerators or when it's disposed of in landfills, it releases toxic chemicals like dioxins and furans, endocrine disrupting chemicals. So we've launched a campaign calling on the Home Depot to lead the building industry away from PVC plastic in packaging and building materials. The good news is Home Depot has already taken action on other chemicals in the past. They've gotten, as I mentioned, phthalates out of flooring. They've gotten PFAS out of carpets and rugs. They've banned methylene chloride from paint removal products, which is a carcinogen. And they've already removed PVC plastic from their own brand packaging. So we're now calling on the Home Depot to take the next step by also restricting PVC plastic in brand name packaging for products that they sell. Over 30,000 consumers over the last year have signed petitions to Home Depot urging action. And just last week, we sent a letter to the Home Depot from more than 50 organizations across the country, including Ms. Sharon Levine from Rise St. James, who you saw in the film, calling on the Home Depot to take action on this plastic. This coming Thursday is the Home Depot's annual shareholder meeting, where investors are going to be voting on 2 separate shareholder resolutions asking the company to take action on toxic plastics like PVC. So another thing that we as consumers can do to leverage our power and influence is to join the campaign to call on Home Depot to take action. And just like on Tosca, you can go to our website at toxicfreefuture.org, and you can send a letter to the CEO of Home Depot calling on them to phase out this toxic plastic, especially when there are safer and cost-effective alternatives that are available.
Thank you, Mike. That reminds me of a story. So the nonprofit Oceana learned that Amazon, the world's largest retailer, in 1 year used something like 600 million pounds of plastic packaging. So they went after Amazon and tried to get them to change. Nothing happened. They did polls of their Amazon Prime customers. They had a whole campaign to get to customers, to get to Amazon. And nothing seemed to work until they went to their shareholders. And that was what changed them. And in fact, Amazon then committed to using paper packaging for most of their mailings. So that was a huge victory. So I'd like to switch gears a little bit and ask Assemblyman Eachus. The engineer, I think his name was John Warner, talked about green chemistry. And I'm just wondering, given your background, is this something you're familiar with? Do you think it's, making improvements or what?
Well, thank you. Chemistry is not physics, so I had to do a little studying before I came here. But I was pleased to do it. And the thing that shocked me most about green chemistry is it has been around since chemistry was founded and discovered. And yet we just continue to ignore the bad aspects of producing these plastics and these chemicals and so on like that. And of course, as mentioned in the film, one of the things that will happen is that the big chemical companies are going to push back because their infrastructure is already built to make these toxic products. Okay? Don't believe them. Okay? It is not more expensive to go to green chemistry. Okay? It is a lot cleaner. It is much better for the environment. And the more that we push back on them, the sooner, hopefully, that we will be able to get them to do the right thing. Now, I agree with you. We may have to go to the stockholders to do it. But another way to try to do it is, of course, through institutions such as mine, your government. Okay? And I'm going to just go off pace just a little bit. Most of the people in here are what I consider to be very, very strong people. In other words, you're going to tell me exactly what you think and what you feel. And that is wonderful. And that's the way that you should feel about every one of your elected officials. I cannot stress enough that we work for you. We work for you. That's important to keep in mind. So when you come and you talk to us, okay, we're not really more important people than you. We can get some stuff done. But please, don't back down. Don't be shy. Express your feelings to us. I sit up in Albany for 6 months out of the year. So, and even though, as was mentioned, I taught for 40 years, I can't tell you what's happening in the classroom today. I'm not in the classroom. So we need folks like yourself who are taking the time to learn about these things to come and talk to us about them and tell us what you need. And then I do have a process where, just to let you all know, I can write bills. And in New York State, we actually have the Packaging Reduction Act, and I'm very proud to be on that. And I don't know if we will get it through this year, but don't be discouraged. Don't be discouraged. It's government. Things are going to take a while. But I do also realize that the longer we wait on this, the more harm we're doing. But this year is a particularly bad year. Just to catch you folks up with us, there is no state budget yet. I don't know if you're aware of that. No matter what the governor has said, there's absolutely no state budget yet. I was told just on Friday, I'll let you in on a secret, by my speaker and my leader, that it probably won't come through this week either. I'm headed back up to Albany. It won't be here this week, but we probably will take it on the following week. Okay, so 2 weeks from now, there's a lot of discussion with it. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because that then leaves 1 week, 4 days for us to pass bills through. And we literally have thousands, hundreds to thousands of bills to get through. Clearly, we can't do it in that period of time. But there are bills up there, and like the Packaging Reduction Act, you have to be sure when you call me, when you call your senator, your other assemblyman. This is not my district, by the way. I do not represent Newburgh. But it's Jonathan Jacobson. But I'm New Windsor. I can walk to my district from here if I needed to. But you have to express to us that this is very important. Because the final thing I will say is the old adage does apply. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. Okay? And take that to heart if you can. So not a lot about green chemistry there. I do believe in it. I can't believe after all this time that we haven't been stressing it more. And, I was reading through it, and I was reading through it with the mind of what kind of bill can I write to insist that companies that do business here in New York, should have products that are produced with green chemistry and not otherwise. We have to be careful, though, okay? There is something called an economy that we have to watch out for, too, and other aspects that we have to keep our eye on. But these are the ideas that you folks give to me that I can act on if necessary.
Thank you, Assemblyman. So I just want to follow up on this bill, which is known as PREA. So it's the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act, okay? And Assemblyman Eachus is a co-sponsor. He has been for several years now. If it's enacted, New York State will be the 8th to adopt this type of legislation. So I'm wondering, Assemblyman, if you could explain to the audience what this bill encompasses.
Well, you covered part of it. Part of it was that the actual packaging material can be something other than plastic and needs to be something other than plastic. You get packages today from Prime that do have them stuffed with paper and so on like that. But the part that I took most interest in, maybe because I'm a physicist, was the volume of the packages. Every time I get something, actually I don't get anything, but my daughter gets something from Amazon or Prime, the first thing I do, and she hates me for it, is I shake the box to see if it's the right size box for the product. And guaranteed, 75% of the time it's not. There's something in there loose and moving around and so on like that. So this Packaging Reduction Act will also require these larger companies to reduce in size the packages that they're sending out. And that will not only reduce the product, but it will save in a lot of ways. If you think about it, you can fit more packages into an electric vehicle or into a truck that they use and to ship them around and so on like that. So these are important aspects of the act that I think are very, very important that we get done. So
Thanks.
sure. Yeah.
I think the Assembly member spoke really well describing it. A couple of other pieces of the bill that I think are notable. One, the bill would put a fee on packaging producers, which would actually bring millions and millions of dollars in funding to municipalities like Newburgh and other cities and towns across the state to help them with waste reduction, recycling, composting, et cetera. Because right now, if you think about it, we as taxpayers are footing the bill for the packaging that they produce. Here in New York State, we spend $1 billion a year, just sending waste to landfills and incinerators. And we're paying for that, we as consumers. Another thing the bill would do, in addition to bringing in money for municipalities like Newburgh and New Windsor, is the bill would also ban chemicals like those that you saw in the film. It would ban phthalates, it would ban bisphenols, it would ban PFAS in plastics. So it would not only reduce packaging, but it would also restrict some of the worst chemicals that are often used in plastics. Right now, we have the votes. In the Senate, the bill has passed the last several years. Unfortunately, it has not passed in the Assembly, even though we have the votes in the Assembly. We have a majority of Assembly members that have co-sponsored the bill. So if any of y'all, if you have a different Assembly member, if you can contact your Assembly member asked them to either co-sponsor the bill. We do know that Assemblymember Jacobson here in Newburgh is also a co-sponsor. But the thing we're asking folks in the Assembly to do is to speak to the Speaker. Ask Speaker Hasty to bring this bill to the floor this legislative session. We may only have a week, but we have the votes. And this is a bill that is a common sense piece of legislation that would clean up our environment, that would protect our health, and bring much needed financial resources to communities across New York State.
Thank you, Mike. So just to follow up, so last year, there were over 100 U.S. corporations that lobbied in Albany against this very bill. So you had McDonald's, PepsiCo, Kraft Foods, L'Oreal, Dell, Delta, and, 80 other companies that showed up in Albany and tried to lobby our legislators into opposing this bill. They were successful because last year the bill never made it to the floor of the Assembly, so it died. So my question to the Assemblyman, why are these companies so determined to go after this packaging when it's just packaging? It's not their product generally, it's just what covers their product.
Well, and Mike had mentioned earlier, and I want to give him credit for it, that we have actually amended this bill over 30 times to try to satisfy, the not the corporations, but to satisfactorily get it through enough of us Assembly people and so on like that. A lot of times, I want to start out with this. The first thing is, a lot of times people constantly come to me. I think Mike did this earlier too, and I understand why. And he said, that bill went through the Senate. Why doesn't it go through the Assembly? We have two different methods of getting bills onto the floor. The Senate can put their bills directly onto the floor, essentially. We in the Assembly have a committee method. It has to go through actually two committees to make it out on the floor. So that right away makes the process longer for us. I'm actually proud of the fact that we have a committee method in the Assembly, because that means that bill gets analyzed. Where if you are allowed to throw any bill just out there and have it passed, sometimes you don't know, and you folks know this, we've made mistakes with bills, bail reform that we've had to go back and fix, and all kinds of other things too. So I think that the bills that we do get are very good put through there. Now, as mentioned, there are a number of lobbying groups. That's why I'm up in Albany for, let's say, half of each day. I am seeing lobbying groups. I'm seeing folks like you who've come up and spoken to me and so on like that. But I do also see these big corporations and so on, and they come up and so on like that. I'm not as easily persuaded by the corporations as some others are. And that's because I don't get money from big corporations. So it's not a money thing for me, where you maybe at different levels of government, you've heard it's money, and it definitely is. But at my level, or at least with me, it's not. I don't have any of these big corporations that, say, well, I'll give you money or something like that. But they can persuade other of my colleagues to change their vote or vote against something that is in our benefit, or to our benefit. It was mentioned that there are 76, there's 150 of us, so you need 76 co-sponsors or people to sign off on it. There are definitely 76, and I think each day there's even getting more. However, the Speaker, my leader, has stated, and I don't know why, but he has stated there actually are not enough votes to get this bill through, this packaging reduction bill through. And maybe some big corporations went to him and persuaded him that it wasn't going to happen, or that they could persuade votes. We're human, it happens. But that's why, again, you have to, as I stated before, call us, speak to us, okay? We work for you. Tell us what the important issues are that you need to have looked at. Today we're talking about, plastics, but I'm sure there's many more other issues that are important to you. And if we don't hear about them, they drop on our list as we hear from other people. And sometimes it's unfortunate, because sometimes the loudest screamers have the most ridiculous ideas sometimes. But, if we hear it enough times, that's what really says, okay, This is what the constituent wants across New York State. And I am a New York State Assemblyman, so I represent the entire state. So, I mean, if you're sitting here and you're saying, oh man, I got to go home and, give Jonathan Jacobson a call, you're not feeling like it and you want to call my office, do it. Okay? You can call any of us at any time. We all work for you. Okay? So please keep that in mind. I hope we have time at the end to answer any questions that you have.
Yeah.
Because if I might, just to finish up, how do we get the bills through? Like, how would we make this law, the packaging reduction? I have to have the bill go through the Assembly. It has to go through the Senate. Done. We made it. Those two legs of the tripod are done. Then we have to get the governor to sign it. Sometimes that's the biggest hurdle that we're going to have. And sometimes maybe we have a little bit of that information ahead of time. Sometimes we don't, on whether it will actually be a bill that will go ahead and the governor will sign. So.
Thank you, Assemblyman. So as difficult as this film was to watch, it did end, I think, on a positive note. We learned that there were some steps that these couples could take that did improve their fertility. So my question to our panelists is, for our audience, what are some ideas you have that people could undertake in their own lives to reduce their exposure to plastics and these toxic chemicals? So Lisa, why don't we begin with you, given your experience, both professionally and as a volunteer with Beyond Plastic? Okay.
Well, what I would say first is to try and reduce as much as you can. Ask yourself, is there an alternative to this plastic product? Can I buy it in glass? Can it be a metal or stainless steel? Can I refill? Can I go to some place like Litterless, or there's plenty of other places around where you can buy in bulk and refill your own containers? I do feel that we overconsume somewhat, and we are able to kind of channel our great-grandmothers, or in my case, my grandmother, who lived without plastic in their kitchens. They were able to cover things with a cloth or another plate instead of saran wrap. They were able to make their own ketchup, which is something that I've started to do. So I've tried to make a plastic-free kitchen. Number one, don't microwave any kind of plastic. Number two, get rid of your Teflon. If you don't have money for new pots and pans, you can go to a thrift store. They often have stainless steel pots and pans available. Get rid of your plastic cutting board. Every time you cut into a piece of fruit, it goes into your body. Stop using plastic drinks. Every time you open up a bottle cap, it's emitting something you can inhale. It migrates into your drink. Make your iced tea. Drink water. Find other solutions. There are plenty of personal products that you can use now. There's a bigger and bigger market of plant-based products that are available. Some of them are expensive. Some are not. Some you can make at home. My husband and I make our own cleaner. We've been doing it for years. It works great. Baking soda and vinegar are amazing. So there are books in the library. Zero Waste is a great website. Check out the information table. There's some QR codes that give you links to easy things that you can do. And last, don't panic. Start small. One or two things at a time. And, before you know it, it becomes habitual. And I think you'll be okay.
Thank you. Mike?
Yeah, no, I think as you saw in the film, and as I'm screaming again, sorry, I get excited. As we saw in the film, there are simple steps that we can take to reduce our exposure to plastics and plastic chemicals. Some of these have been covered before, but you often need to hear something multiple times before it sinks in. On bisphenols, oftentimes canned foods are lined with epoxy resins that contain bisphenol A. So where possible, try to opt for fresher foods as opposed to foods that are in cans. Now, I recognize that is sometimes not affordable for everyone, but when possible, try to avoid canned food when you can, because that's a key reason where key area where you can be exposed to bisphenols. Another way you could be exposed to bisphenols is from thermal receipt paper. As we saw in the film, when you handle receipt paper, you could be exposed to bisphenol chemicals. And in fact, the levels that you're exposed to are significantly higher. The good news is many companies are moving away from bisphenols in thermal receipt paper. Companies like Lowe's and Target, CVS, PetSmart. The state of Washington just became the first state in the country to ban bisphenols in thermal receipt paper. That's something we'd love to see here in New York. On phthalates, a couple things on phthalates to mention. Over 90% of all phthalates are used to soften PVC vinyl plastics, so wherever possible, try to avoid PVC vinyl plastic. Additionally, as you heard in the film, oftentimes phthalates are added to fragrance products like perfumes, shampoos, conditioners. So if you're buying a beauty or personal care product or a cosmetic and you see the word fragrance on the label, oftentimes that's a signal that the product may contain phthalates. It's not a guarantee, but it's a pretty good sign that it may contain phthalates because phthalates are often added to help that product carry the scent. So avoid products that are fragranced wherever possible. But the thing that I think is really important to stress is that, yes, there are steps we can take, but you shouldn't really need a PhD in toxicology or chemistry to address these problems. We really need systemic solutions. We need corporations to take action on toxic chemicals and plastics. We need businesses like Home Depot to step up. And we need policymakers in states like New York to enact common sense legislation like PREA to take action on toxic chemicals and toxic plastics.
One of the things from this film that was shocking to me is the fact that I am leaving here and I'm going to go buy a bamboo toothbrush. I swear to God, that picture of that little lad, his teeth didn't look so hot, scrubbing them with plastic. I'm going, oh, wow, damn. I didn't even think about it. And yet, we do that several times a day and all. So, but yeah, they covered it very well. I agree very much with what Lisa said. Small steps at a time. We can't ask society, we can't ask you to all of a sudden just do away with all plastics and so on like that. And then ending with what Mike said, keep your policymakers in mind. Be willing to express your thoughts to us. If you leave here and you feel just a little bit better about talking to your New York State Assembly people and senators, I've accomplished my job here. Okay? We're nothing special. We are not. We are just like you. We need your information. We need to know what you need, and we need to write those laws for you and get them enacted. But it is government. Okay? So we have to always keep that in mind. At all. And we are working very hard to try to, Mike brought this up, try to offset a lot of the cuts that we have from the federal government. Believe it or not, this year we're pretty good because New York State ended with a surplus this last year. But starting next year, if things don't turn around and change, we're here in New York State going to be in a pretty desperate strait and all with the amount of money that we're going to lose. Everybody remembers or recalls that a lot of these things that are going to go in effect are going to go in effect on January 1st, 2027. And you know why they did that, I hope. So, keep that in mind. I'm not telling you how to vote at all, but please go out and vote. I love telling my little story. When I decided to run for this position in 2022, then get in 2023, I got into the show a little late. And obviously, I had an opponent up here. We don't generally have primaries as much as we have general elections. I had an opponent, and I know some people have heard this story before, but in that election in 2022, there were over 37,500 votes cast between my opponent and myself, between the two of us. 37,500 votes. Over that, I won by 8 votes. Okay? Don't ever accept that your vote does not count. If anybody voted for me back in that election, they were one of those 8 votes. Okay? It's not the last 8 or the first 8. It's every person that voted, and your vote does count. So please do get out and vote. that is a very powerful way you have of getting things enacted here. So,
Thank you, Assemblyman. So one final question to our panelists. This is a difficult film to watch. It's a lot of intense information that some of us are learning for the first time. But what gives you hope? Lisa.
I think what gives me hope is that there's more awareness and there's more discussion, and that science is getting better, and we're able to see these teeny tiny little things and the impact that they're having on reproduction, or that they're having on our blood vessels. So cardiologists just found that plaque that's been removed from people in their carotid arteries has plastics in it. We know that it rips and it tears. That people like Memorial Sloan Kettering are recognizing how it compromises the immune system. So they can fight it with other, it's like chemical warfare. So they're doing immunotherapy for cancer patients. It's not just about obstetrics and gynecology. It's every organ in our body. It's Parkinson's, it's dementia. So there's a lot of studies going on. I find that encouraging. The other thing that I find encouraging is that we as consumers have a power in our dollars. If I choose to buy Tide plastic laundry soap, I'm keeping that out of my clothing. I'm keeping it out of our waterways, and I'm also keeping it out of the landfill, and ultimately our oceans. So I think we have power in our purchasing. And if there's enough awareness and there are enough products available that are plant-based, or you can make it at home, make your own soup, put it in the freezer. Those are the kind of things that give me hope. I don't know too much about green chemistry, but I do feel that if it's something that's part of the curriculum now, and young chemists are encouraged to think about the toxicity on human impact, that, we can only hope.
What gives me hope is that knowing that change is possible, that when we organize, when we come together as people, we can actually change the future direction of this country. 20 years ago, when you would go buy a baby bottle here in Newburgh or anywhere, it contained bisphenol A. When you would go to buy a kid's toy, it contained phthalates. When you would go buy a shower curtain, it contained phthalates. Here in New York and across the country, states have been passing laws that have been restricting harmful chemicals and plastics. New York has banned bisphenol A in baby bottles. New York has banned PFAS in food packaging. We've banned flame retardants in furniture. And we know that when we do that, our exposure to chemicals and plastics or from plastics go down. We did a study a few years ago in Washington State, where our organization is based, and we found that after we banned certain flame retardants in furniture and electronics, those levels of flame retardants went down by 70% in women's breast milk. 70%. When we banned phthalates in kids' toys, the levels have declined significantly in our bodies. So we know that change is possible. We know that states like New York can take action to protect ourselves from toxic chemicals and plastics, but we're going up some of the biggest corporations in the world. Legislation like PREA is actually the most lobbied legislation in New York State right now. Some of the biggest corporations in our country, companies like Exxon, Dow Chemical, Amazon, and others are fighting this. So that's why we need to stand up. We need to contact our legislators, urge them to pass legislation like PREA to protect ourselves from plastic chemicals. We need to reach out to our members of Congress, take action at our website, toxicfreefuture.org. Tell them not to weaken our nation's chemical safety law. We can't go back 50 years to the days when EPA could not ban asbestos. And we need to hold corporations like the Home Depot accountable and urge them to get toxic plastics out of packaging. As the Assembly member said, we have enormous power as citizens, but we need to exercise that. Otherwise, the petrochemical and the plastics industry is going to continue to poison us for generations to come.
Thank you.
The hope I have is kind of the hope I had an entire career with, and that is the younger generations. and how much more involved they are getting now, and that we are willing to encourage them to keep doing this. When I talk about lobbyists, I have high schoolers come in, I have elementary schoolers come in and tell me they need longer recesses and stuff like that. But at least they are getting used to coming in and speaking to their elected officials. And that's what I really have a lot of hope for. And I would hope that I'm the type of person that encourages them to continue to come in and raise their issues and fight for their issues. It's going to be a fight. Everything's going to be a fight, because you can pick any issue in this world. You can pick the most beautiful issue in this world. You'll find somebody's against it, out there that it's against it. So it always takes a bit of a fight. But I think that the younger generations, we have some in the back here, and we had some show up earlier, little ones and all. That's wonderful. That is absolutely great news and good news. And I am very, very encouraged and hopeful with that. So I thank you all. I hope we give them a chance to ask some questions. Okay.